Welcome to the Unit 1 Echocardiography module. My name is Dimitri Papanagnou, attending physician in emergency medicine at SUNY Downstate and Kings County Hospital, and the director for medical simulation. In this module, we're going to use basic ultrasonography to better understand the cardiac examination during the physical examination. This module is not an ultrasound training module. Rather, we're going to build on concepts during the cardiac exam in identifying the four chambers of the heart, identifying valves, explaining the mechanisms that generate heart sound, and using a few modalities to understand blood flow. Ultrasound is really no different than sonar employed by dolphins, where they use echoes to understand sizes, shapes, and distances of the landscape underwater. In medicine, we employ transducers or probes, from the curvilinear abdominal probe to the cardiac probe. These ultrasound probes create sound. These sound waves vibrate through organ systems, create echoes, and ultimately make their way back to the probe. Consider the following schematic. Electricity travels through the cord. Crystals vibrate, creating sound. These sound waves travel through the body and bounce off of organs and make their way back to the probe. In fact, the probe is listening most of the time, listening for these echoes to come back with information, which is then transferred and translated into imaging. To view the heart, we need to use a few windows. These are going to be windows through which the ultrasound probe is going to capture images of the heart. The first is a parasternal long axis view. This view divides the heart into long axes, where we have a left half and a right half. We're able to visualize the right valve, left atrium, and left ventricle with the mitral valve. Here's an echo clip. Notice the left atrium, the mitral valve next to it leading into the left ventricle, the aorta, and the right ventricle. The right ventricle is the most anterior structure closest to the sternum. This is a great view to visualize the mitral valve. It's the closure of this valve that generates the heart sounds. The next view is the parasternal short axis view. Placed also on the chest, this gives us a nice short axis cross-section of the left ventricle and the right ventricle. Notice the larger left ventricle, its thicker walls, its larger size. It's 2 times the size of the right ventricle. In medicine, we use this view to get an overall gestalt of the patient's cardiac function. Notice the good quote-unquote squeeze. The right ventricle smaller than the left ventricle over to the left. The next window is a subcostal 4-chamber view. For this view, the ultrasound probe is placed under the patient's rib cage. The ultrasound beam is going to travel through the patient's liver and to the heart. It's for this reason that we actually see the liver in the upper near field of the image. In this view, we should be able to see right ventricle, right atrium, and the tricuspid valve separating the two, as well as the left ventricle. Notice the left ventricle and the right ventricle, the tricuspid valve next to it, and the liver in the near field. This is a subcostal 4-chamber view. Atria may be sometimes difficult to visualize in this view. The last view is the apical 4-chamber view. Apical because the beam goes through the cardiac chamber apex down to the base, and 4-chamber because all 4 chambers are visualized. Notice how the beam travels through the patient's cardiac apex to the base. We're able to visualize left and right atrium, as well as left and right ventricles. In this schematic, we're able to see the right ventricle and right atrium with the tricuspid valve separating the two, and the left ventricle and the left atrium with the mitral valve separating the two. Let's take a look at the clip. Left atrium, left ventricle with mitral valve in between, right ventricle, right atrium with tricuspid valve in between. Notice the thick interventricular septum between the two ventricles, left and right. Without getting too technical, we can use modes of the ultrasound to look at flow, blood flow. In this case, we're looking at flow from the left atrium to the left ventricle. This is an apical 4 view. We can see the same thing in the parasternal long view. Blood flow should go from the left atrium to the left ventricle across the mitral valve, but in this diseased heart, we see the opposite. With mitral regurgitation, we see blood flow going from the left ventricle back into the left atrium. We'll discuss a lot more of this tomorrow, but let's have a quick review. Which is the largest chamber of the heart? It's C, the left ventricle. Identify the right ventricle in the following clip. This is a parasternal short-axis view of the heart. Notice the big left ventricle. The right ventricle is to the left of the left ventricle. Identify the mitral valve in this apical clip of the heart. This is an apical 4 view. We see all 4 chambers. In this clip, the left heart, the left ventricle, and left atrium are on the right side of the image. So the mitral valve is in between the left ventricle and the left atrium. Lastly, draw an imaginary line that would describe normal blood flow across the mitral valve of this view of the heart. That imaginary line would go from the left atrium on the left, across the valve, to the right, into the left ventricle. If you have any questions, please be sure to bring them with you tomorrow. A lot of these concepts will be discussed tomorrow. We look forward to meeting you, and please email me with any questions, concerns,